morning, everyone. Today we are having Scott Markovits with us. Scott currently lives in Israel. Hi, Scott, near Jerusalem, and is originally from New York. He's married and is a proud father. He helped build foundation of one of the biggest all remote unicorns. He's currently launching a startup for distributed teams and has also mentored 800 startups. Wow, Scott. When he's not building startups, he's probably hiking or eating tacos. Clearly, tacos is his favorite. Scott is also passionate about remote work and the future of work. He hosts a podcast, Leading from Afar, all about leadership. He's also passionate advocate for Israel, and that's why we are having him today with us to understand how Israel has done this incredible task of encountering COVID situation. So I clearly remember about a year ago, the world was grappling with the COVID situation. Everybody was really perplexed, and see now, Israel has really got over its situation, and it has vaccinated about 60 to 70% of its population. It's really incredible. And Scott, I have also got to know that these days you're operating perfectly fine and everything is back to normal. People are not even required to put on the mask. Life is back to normal. How it feels now, back again to normal.
Yeah, it certainly feels good. I clarified that people still need to wear a mask indoors in public transportation, but outside. So the last couple of weeks I've gone and I've met a couple of friends out for lunches, and the first time was like, oh my God, I'm at a restaurant. Like, oh my God, I'm with a friend. Like, it's you in person over the first time in a year, more than a year. So it was certainly fantastic, and it's certainly good to feel like we're towards the end. I always try to use the quote. There was a baseball player in the U.S. probably about 70 years ago named Yogi Berra, who was very famous for one-liners. And one of the things that he said was, "It ain't over till it's over." So I'm very much of that perspective of it seems it's over, or it seems just about over, but until it's completely finished everywhere, then you kind of still have in the back of the head just to be still a little bit extra safe and cautious and things like that. But it feels great to see that life is starting to return to a normality again.
Yeah. And that was very rightly said. Until it's over for everyone, we are still in the fight. And India is very particularly still in the fight. We are struggling a lot with this pandemic. So it came naturally to me, like, why not try to understand it from our peers? Why not understand it from Israel, how and what they did to overcome the situation? So my first question in this series will be, what's the role of community in coping with this situation in Israel? Because see, nobody was ready for this situation, and there was this massive issue of logistics, especially in India with a very wide geography. I'm sure Israel might have also faced this kind of issue. So what was the role of community there? How it helped the government in logistics issue, how medicines etc were given to those who were vulnerable. So if you can throw some light on that.
Yeah, sure. So first, I think before starting and to entering, certainly my heart goes out to the people in India. From watching on the news, it's been certainly a struggle in the last number of weeks, and it's very tough. And so, wishing a speedy end to this and end to the wave, and hopefully that's the end of it and get past it. But kind of now to go to your question for community. Community is the heart, a call of the Jewish people, and outside of Israel as well. There is a religious belief that, a spiritual belief that every soul that person has is interconnected with every other soul within the Jewish people. So, in one way, we're all connected, and we all have some piece of each other in ourselves. So, because of that, there's very much of a deep-rooted community feel that we're all responsible and all connected to each other. So, here in Israel, when COVID hit, we saw a lot of things going on within the communities about people raising money, people needing help. For example, within the community, kind of the small area that I live in here, a WhatsApp message would go out or an email would go out saying, hey, this family with 4 or 5 kids, unfortunately, maybe the mother and maybe a couple of the kids had a bad case of COVID, and they need help with meals. So within an hour, within a couple hours, certainly by the next day, the next 14 days or 10 days, whatever the quarantine period is, all the meals were set, both lunches and dinners. Everyone in the community kind of rushes together, and that's kind of the norm in those troubled times, unfortunately, and even in the happier times when somebody gets married, when someone has a child, and obviously, the mom is still in the hospital for a couple of days with the baby. Every time you get these messages and WhatsApp messages, and we call it a food train or a meal train, and literally 10 days, 14 days worth of meals are set up voluntarily by people in the community, by people who don't even really know the person. It's just that opportunity of saying, hey, this person's in need. This person obviously can't be cooking and standing in the kitchen and making food for the family in that example. So the community wants to give back in some capacity. And it's the same thing of people needing was maybe babysitters or people helping pick up their kids from school. So the parents may have been home with COVID and they needed help with their child getting home from school because they didn't have a bus. So it was just kind of another same type of message on WhatsApp group or an email saying, hey, can somebody help take my kid home for a couple of days? And the community rushes into doing that. So it's been a very big part of the Jewish people for 3,000 years, and obviously here in Israel. I think historically, probably per capita, anywhere in the world, the Jewish people are usually number one, number two of charity and charitable donations, especially in the more religious communities. There's endless in the community. I'll say myself, I'm a religious person. So in the community, there's literally organizations for everything, for clothes, for food, for school supplies, for housewares, for literally everything. And these organizations in many cases give things for free or lend things for free, and there's no cost or things are a minimum. Again, because the idea is you're there to help the rest of the community. To the second point of the question about logistics, I think a good part of how the country did, I think, is on two sides. Number one, unfortunately, the country is, for 70 some years has always been on a preparedness for war scenario. So there's always that feeling of if something happens, how do you get people from point A to point B? How do you get supplies? How do you do these things? So I think there's been that historic training of, okay, in some event, how do you mobilize the country? How do you mobilize certain forces or people to be able to handle a certain job? So I think that underlying area was definitely helpful. Another thing that we did very well compared to the US was, I think, two things. Number one, we just looked at a person's age. So a person 65 and up, priority list, they got the vaccination first. I know in the US, it was you had to be 65 and up, and you had to be high risk, and you had to be A, B, C, D, and E just to be able to qualify. And obviously, to be able to get through that many people took quite a long time. Another thing was very much of if somebody's around and you have extra doses, you go give it to them. There's stories here in Israel about nurses at the end of the day had some extra doses and were running outside and finding a pizza delivery guy, dragging him inside, jabbing him in the arm with the vaccination, and then let him go back to delivering pizzas. My wife got an SMS message from our local healthcare provider saying, hey, it's like 4 o'clock. We have extra doses, first come, first serve. I think at that point, it was maybe 55 and up people were getting the doses, and my wife is obviously younger than that, but it was the sense that we don't want them to go to waste. Versus again in America, I know in the state of New York, the governor of New York was, especially at the beginning, saying any organization or clinic that gives a shot to someone who's not online for it will get a I think it was like a $10 million fee. So they were much, if you're on the list, you get one. If you're not on the list, you don't get it. And at the end of the day, especially with the Pfizer and I think Moderna vaccines that had to be stored at a certain temperature and all the kind of pieces around that, it'd be better for them to throw them in the garbage than give someone that needs a shot, that's going to get a shot at some point in time, to give it to them. So we were very much of, here's a priority. If you're this age, you get one. And I think in the city of Haifa, which is the third largest city in northern Israel, they set up a drive-through vaccine clinic outside the soccer stadium. So it's kind of driving to a fast food place. They drive in, you roll down the window, they jab you in the arm, and you keep going with the rest of your day. But it was that kind of sense of how do you get that many people in and out and moving that quickly and have that organization that you don't have to wait. There aren't lines. There's people going to get. And then my parents are in the U.S. and they were in Florida, and they had like a lot of those situations where you could line up towards the end of the day, and if they had extra vaccines, then they would give out. So you can have 253 people, 300 people waiting in a line every day for a vaccine that maybe they'd have, maybe they didn't have. It was obviously very difficult, and how they were organizing and how they were getting it to the different places was difficult. It may be here in Israel that there's four called healthcare organizations, or HMOs. So everything, there aren't clinics, aren't side things, or pharmacies that give it out. Everything is given through the specific clinic. So it comes in, it goes to the clinic, then they distribute it within the cities, obviously where the population and where it was needed most, and then it was done out at the specific HMO type office versus giving it out to in the US a CVS or some pharmacy or different places. It was give it straight to the place that's needed and let them distribute it going out from there.
So that was really very insightful. The point that you mentioned that people are always prepared because Israel in such situation they're always prepared for any kind of war that might break out.
Yep.
And that also probably creates a special type of bond between the government and its people, because the government is helping you out in all kind of preparedness. And I guess there was not any issue with trust issue with vaccination, because here in India we were facing a lot of issue with this. People were skeptical: is the vaccine going to work or not?
Yep.
So I think that certainly didn't happen in Israel. People were
Yep.
really very trustworthy with their government, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's obviously people everywhere that they're skeptical, and there's certainly people there who are not. To the statistics that you gave before, from my understanding, I think pretty much every adult 16 or over that wants a shot, wants a vaccine, has gotten it. And the ones who haven't are obviously children under 16. So the people who don't want it for whatever reasons it may be, they're excluded. So everyone else that does want one, I think again, every adult, I believe, has been vaccinated, and now it's just really up to the children to get their vaccinations. But I think it's very much of, yes, trusting the healthcare system and understanding, like most things, to end some pandemic or prevent the flu that comes around every year, you need a flu shot, you need some kind of medicine or vaccine that's going to be able to prevent this. And really, at least to me, after the first lockdown, this was the only thing that was going to end the pandemic, at least here in Israel. It was a race. It was a race to the vaccinations and getting to that amount, because it was clear that when people were in close proximity to each other, that's how the virus spread. With masks, not masks. No, there's lots of data that comes back and forth. But if you have two people in the same area, that's a problem. So you're never going to be able to prevent that. Even as a government, you're never going to be able to lock people up for that long. You can try, but it's never going to last that long. So it's really going to be that race to the vaccination until you can get potentially to the herd immunity, you get the large group amount of people that are vaccinated, and then eventually it starts to tail off like it's thankfully been doing here in Israel.
Yeah, certainly. Lockdown or curbing people into their houses, that's not a long-term strategy. Vaccination is the only way forward. That is how we can totally win over the situation. In India, this also happened. Government went out for a lockdown. There was a mega lockdown for about three months or so,
Yep.
and the whole economy got churned down because of that. And people really got into this notion that probably this is a certain kind of propaganda from government side. Maybe they are not able to handle the economy well, hence they are imposing this lockdown. So there was both kind of right rounds was going on from government side and people side as well. And
Yep.
in this entire process, the economy went down. And we are still struggling with that a lot. So how did Israel maintain this? Israel is always a place of innovation. Many kind of innovations happen out of this place. And what Israel basically do to maintain its economy during the time of lockdown? I'm sure there must be some lockdown of a certain period. Was it there, Scott? Was there?
Um, there were three lockdowns here over the
There was.
last year plus.
So
Yep.
how Israel was able to cope up with this problem, and again got their economy back on the track after this lockdown? So any pointers on that?
Yeah, sure. So the economy was definitely affected here, like everywhere everywhere else in the world. My personal belief is the first lockdown ended everywhere in the world because every government was afraid to put their economy to sleep for too long with a fear that it would never wake up. So I was a personal believer at the first lockdown that they should have extended it another month or two to really get the cases down to almost zero, because then if there's almost zero cases, then in theory, the virus can't spread. But then that I think would also require you to close your borders for an indefinite amount of period, which we've done somewhat on and off, but allowing Israelis from all over the world to come back. And I think a good majority of the COVID that we've had here in Israel have originally started in other countries, either tourists at the beginning or Israelis from different places coming back in and bringing it in. Um, so, like you said, it was never going to be feasible to lock down the entire country and the economy for too long because, again, your fear doesn't wake up. Um, I think here in Israel, a very overwhelming part of the majority of the economy is based around high tech. And that obviously allows, I think it's something, I've been a remote worker for 9 years. For 9 years, that I clearly knew that remote was the future, that there was no need for an office, that historically we went to an office because that's where all the equipment was. The typewriters were, or the computers that were the size of a room, or printers or networks that you had to be in. So you had to be in one physical location to be able to use the equipment to do your job. When the cloud came out, that no longer was the standard. You just need an internet connection and a computer, and that's all you need. So all the Israeli companies, yes, many people lost their jobs here, again, because the whole world was affected, but basically most of the economy was able to shift online and do work online and continue doing their work again through the cloud. Even government jobs and things like that, you were able to, instead of having to go through some kind of government office to file for something or have an appointment, whatever, you could do all those things online. You could do it through a phone call. You didn't need to physically show up anymore. So the fact that people could do their jobs in whatever capacity, working for the government, working for a startup, again, whatever it is, you can now do from home. So I think that was the biggest opportunity that allowed Israel, and certainly I think the rest of the world would be the same, to be able to get through it, and especially once COVID starts tailing off, to then really start ramping up, hiring again. I think here in Israel, hiring is booming here again because now companies are starting to be able to contact and sell and start businesses again. So people are obviously now trying to bring those people who lost their jobs now back in store. I think it's for again that's a majority. For smaller businesses, I think it's like anything. It's any entrepreneur that takes an opportunity and tries to find a creative solution for it. The one example I try to use, again, being a lover of tacos, there's a taco restaurant in Jerusalem, which is my go-to place. Restaurants were closed for a year for people sitting in there. They had delivery. So you can, in Jerusalem, in your neighborhood, you had some opportunity to be able to sell delivery or pick up. I think maybe part of the time was pick up, part of the time was delivery. But they knew that they had a very big community of people that lived outside Jerusalem, that live in the city that I live in, they live in Tel Aviv, that live in different cities outside of Jerusalem, that were their regular customers. So they lost access to them because those people couldn't come into Jerusalem. So they said, okay, well, how do we continue our business going with a large community that's outside of Jerusalem? We would just go to them. So one day a week we'd be in Tel Aviv, one day a week we'd be in some other city, and we'd be on social media saying, okay, tomorrow we're going to be in Tel Aviv from, 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Everybody order tonight by 8 o'clock, and we'll deliver the orders to a place in Tel Aviv. So another restaurant could have said, okay, well, we're just going to rely on orders that pick up or delivery within our city. And maybe they worked, maybe they didn't. But the smart entrepreneur says, hey, I have an opportunity that I can expand outside. I can still get revenue to come in. I just need to be a little bit creative. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, again, food, whatever type of thing is, of trying to expand your business, whether to digitize your business. I mean, I think restaurants are a great example. You go into a restaurant, you pay cash. Most of it is, even if you're ordering delivery, most of their business isn't digital. But now if you're going to a total digital business and you need to pivot your entire business into all an e-commerce business, okay, having a website or having some third-party website that you can do orders and confirmations and all these things. I think it's the smart entrepreneur that sees the opportunity there and says, okay, I need to take advantage of this, because if not, maybe my business will still keep going, maybe it won't, but I at least need to make the effort and think of some creative hacks to be able to continue my business moving forward.
Excellent. So people did really came with creative ideas to still get going in this tough times.
Yeah.
But certainly, as you mentioned, like digital backbone should already be prepared for these to happen. Like a website, it should be there in place. There should be some digital outreach platform already been in place so that they can reach the people. So
Yep.
was this digital backbone already prepared beforehand, or people readily adopted to the situation and they created it on the fly? So how did it?
I think the techs, at least some of the technology was there. Probably a lot of it is not ideal, but it gets people through the job. When I speak about remote work, all the tools that got companies through remote work, Slack, Zoom, things like that, were never designed for remote work. They just were the tools that happened to get people from A to B. So I think from that sense, there's definitely online tools that you can use, third-party apps, third-party ordering apps, and like maybe Instacart or things like that. I don't know what the companies in India are, but some of these apps, Uber Eats or things like that in America, where you can build kind of the connection to there. Or there's plenty of those online opportunities where you can kind of put in like a white glove. May not be great, but basic kind of minimum ordering. Now through, I remember for the taco one, I think it was just a basic list. It was kind of basic pictures, basic kind of type things. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't wonderful, it wasn't beautiful, but allowed you like to pick your food, how many you want, click pay, put a credit card in, and done. So I think the optimal, the best tools to run an e-commerce business on whatever business it is. There's probably some cases that there's fantastic tools that are out there, and there's other ones that will be fantastic in the years to come. But it was enough to get the job done. And I think that was the great opportunity of those companies that saw, okay, I could use this basic tool that gave me basic minimal functionality, and then maybe use Facebook, use an Instagram to build, engage my community, and then push them to this basic ordering website where they put in kind of their basic things, or even like could be in probably a Google form, right? I want 5 tacos with guacamole and this, and here's my credit card, and bang, you can do it in some basic, very easy way, but allowed, again, allowed these companies to get through the COVID time. And now smart entrepreneurs will say, hey, I think there's a real opportunity here to build a real system, a real robust platform to be able to digitize these restaurants or businesses or whatever type of stores that are moving forward.
So great, like people really catched on the opportunity and they adopted themselves in order to keep their businesses going. So really cool on
Yep.
that. And here in India also, like after the first lockdown, people were really fearful of opening their businesses again. And government has to put a lot of efforts in advertising and bringing people back. So there
Yep.
was a lot of push from government to revive their economy once again. So how was
Yep.
it in Israel? Has government to put any kind of initiative to bring people back to work, or people were readily happy to come back? They were they trusted it like things will be fine, and they just went to the work. How was it?
Um, I think the government probably gave some type of small grants to the companies to try to keep them afloat through COVID. I think probably again the best thing probably that they did was no in restaurant dining. Maybe was pickup. I think in the beginning it probably wasn't pickup; it was only delivery. So at least that potentially gives more comfort to workers in the restaurant that there's not going to be a restaurant of 100 people. It may just be the 8 or 10 people who are working there, and then between the 8 or 10 people, hopefully everyone's obviously wearing a mask, and you're trying to take as many precautions as you can while running your business. But I think in many cases it's their business, it's their heart, it's their soul, it's what they do. So they want their business to be open. They want to keep going, and it was looking to the government for help. It was looking for create, and again, I think it was that story of creative opportunities of how you did it. I know there was like a famous article, or not famous, it was an article towards the beginning of COVID. I think it was about a falafel restaurant. I think maybe somewhere in Tel Aviv-ish area, where I think something happened with the owner of it. He got sick. He had a heart attack. He had whatever the scenario was because he was so overstressed of the lack of business and what he's going to do with the business. And again, for me, I look at it as there's definitely stress. Of course, everyone was under that. But how does that restaurant owner take advantage of the opportunity that they have there? Again, are they like the taco restaurant says, okay, well, we're going to move to online. We're going to build a community. We're going to invest our time. And that for me, any business that has customers, that's not called a B2C type business. It could be a restaurant. It could be a startup. the big priority, and I just wrote a blog post about this, is about building a community, building a passion community. And if you have people that love your brand, love your food, love your whatever you're selling, if a time like this comes, then you rely on them. You reach out, again, on Facebook and whatever community options you have, and then you find that creative solution to keep the business going. To be able to deliver to a city, and here we're bringing orders for 100 people into the city on a Tuesday, and all the 100 people that live in the city who love us, here we're bringing you food, so you don't have to go another year before you can have our fantastic tacos. You can have it once a week. You just order, and we'll drop it off. You pick it up in your local city, and fantastic. Again, it's like anything, even in software, you have those founders who see a problem and, okay, how do we get around it? How do we, and for me, I think that's part of the ethos here in Israel, is that creative way to try to solve problems and move past issues.
Yeah, and that's what entrepreneurship is about. And you have to find creative solutions around the problem. And
Yep.
now that we are talking about the startups, as we have discussed in the beginning as well, Israel is really a great hub for innovation and startup. So
Yep.
how startup helped with innovation during this COVID scenario? So I was reading few articles, and there were really cool startups which came with things like remote healthcare, remote health monitoring, and things like that.
Yep.
So throw some light on that, Scott. Like you have been mentoring a lot, about 800 startups you have assisted. So you are the perfect person to answer this.
Sure. So I'll put it again, is starting is continuing what I'd said. It's in the history of Israel, there's always been issues, and we've known that we don't have the manpower, we don't have whatever it is to solve it, so we need to come up with creative solutions. There's a famous author in America named Mark Twain who wrote Huckleberry Finn and some other very well-known books. He traveled here to Israel maybe 120, 100 some odd years ago, and he famously wrote that he could never understand why the Jewish people wanted to come back to Israel, because it was literally just a desert. There was literally nothing here. It was desert, no trees, no nothing. Just you're you picture the desert. That's what Israel was. So he couldn't understand why Jews for 2,000 years were praying and crying and everything to come back. So you see now, you look even at the satellite photography. There's green all over the place. So we came here to Israel. We don't have access to that much natural clean water, fresh water. We're surrounded by a couple of seas. So we said, okay, well, we don't have access to that much fresh water, but we need water. So what do? Israel then became the leader, and still is a leader, in desalinization. We take what we have and we figure out a creative way to use it. Now that we have water, we want to grow things. So, but we can't just be spraying water all over the place and dumping water everywhere because we don't have so much. So Israel then invented the drip irrigation system, where you have like a pipe and you have a little hole next to the root in every one of the plants. So you put a little bit of water, and every one of those plants is exactly perfectly, watered where it needs to be and how much water needs to be. And all the types of solutions, with the military, coming up with creative cyber solutions and types of things like that. It's, you understand what your limitations are, but you have a problem that you need to solve. So you find those kind of creative ways to do it. So a lot of these fantastic solutions that came out through COVID were obviously never designed for COVID. They were designed for general health, some other type of things, but they saw, hey, we can use our technology and pivot it in a small way to give help. There was a company here, unfortunately, I don't remember the name of it. It made some kind of equipment, I think, for the hospital. And they were able to convert their product into a breathing machine. And they were able to do it, and they put all the plans on open source. In theory, this could have been tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue that the company wanted to do. But they said, we're in a pandemic. We want to save lives. Revenue isn't important. So we took what I said, we put the blueprints. Here's the blueprints. Anybody, anywhere in the world, you want to copy it, go for it, take it, and just go save people. So it was taking that solution that may have been aimed for something else and say, okay, we have a problem. How do we solve it with what we have? And the same thing with some of the masks. There's a mask here, a company called Synovia or something that has a mask that kills 99%, 99 point whatever something percent of masks. Again, these things weren't designed for COVID, but you say, okay, how do we do some little kind of change to be able to pivot in there to try to solve solutions? And I think that's been the beauty here in Israel, coming from that root of 70 years ago, where you have a global pandemic, you have some product that wasn't designed for COVID, but could, if you just make a kind of few little tweaks to it or do a little bit something different, it can now help in COVID. And you want to be able to help. And then again, not in the cases, especially for revenue, you just want to help the world be able to do that. So taking those opportunities of using existing technology for different cases and being able to see, okay, how can we use it differently to help fight COVID? And I think that, again, that was one of the fantastic things that was done here in Israel, was just saying, okay, we have a big problem. We need to solve it. What can we do? What tools do we have at our disposal that we can now try to use to solve this problem that's here in Israel and all over the world?
Yeah, our previous question as well. Um, Again, things are revolving around creativity only. So you need to be creative, and Israel has been really perfect in understanding its constraints and then playing around those constraints and turning it out into some creative solutions. So really
Yep.
cool on that part. And I really like that thought that you shared, that people literally sent out the open source their blueprint and for just for helping purpose, and that's really
Yep.
novel. That's really very novel. So we saw a lot of such humanitarian efforts throughout the world, and thanks for bringing that to notice again.
For
But
sure.
so one thing, anything special that the government does there to establish this kind of ecosystem, because startups and they cannot play individually. There has to be certain kind of ecosystem, because every kind of startup is depending on some other thing. So
Yep.
what kind of efforts does government bring, does the community do, to build the ecosystem as a whole? So anything on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the country and large organizations themselves understand that any large organization has lots of bureaucracy and moves very, very slowly. So why everybody knows that across the world in business. So they don't have the opportunity to innovate. But if you're really going to grow, you need that opportunity for innovation. So that's when you need to look towards the startups that can move a lot faster. So here in Israel, they do a lot of things, and the government, for one, has I think it's through the Agency of Science or Technology, I forget exactly the name, but they give a grant to anyone who's working on a startup, who's trying to do something to move the technology forward in some sense, or use kind of new technologies. They can get a grant. I believe it's once every year, 2 years, up to $500,000 US dollars. No equity. In the end, there's no kind of relationship. It's just one day if you have an exit, if you want to do us a favor and return some of that money, that'd be fantastic. But no, there's no real expectation or hands tied. A lot of the organizations, hospitals, healthcare organizations, all have innovation platforms, accelerators. In Jerusalem, the biggest hospital is called Hadassah. They have an accelerator called Biohouse. So they understand, we as a hospital need obviously to innovate. We need innovative products. We need innovative systems. But we as a hospital can't move that fast. We have too much bureaucracy to do it on our own. So the best opportunity that we can do is take a chunk of money and give it towards startups that can move obviously a lot faster. And that's certainly where the real opportunity is. So all the healthcare organizations, the four of them, have their own innovation centers. I think most of the banks here in Israel also have their own kind of incubators and innovation systems. So it's very much of understanding that large organizations as a whole can't move fast, they can't innovate, but you need that innovation to be able to stay on par with the rest of the world or stay ahead. So you need to, again, find those creative solutions of saying, okay, well, we're going to take money that we have and we're just going to create an incubator, create an accelerator, create an innovation lab within our team, within our company, and allow those startups that are interested in our space to build hopefully great products that give us a value, and be able to invest in them, because we know that's the best way and the fastest way that we're going to be able to implement and get those innovative technologies into our hospital, into our bank, into our healthcare system, or whatever it may be. And it's also building those relationships, especially in the medical world. The four HMOs are very, very open to beta testing, pilot testing, all kinds of health tech companies. They're very open to doing those because, again, they understand those solutions can potentially help. So, and they also give a lot of opportunities to the end customer. So there was a company here in Israel called Title Care. They build, I think, a couple of devices that connect to your iPhone, one to test your temperature, one to do, I think, like a throat thing, like a couple of different types of things. So they initially piloted with one or two of the HMO companies in here to do the testing, to obviously get that data that they would need to then grow fast. And customers of their HMO are able to get that at a significant discount, so they can get it for maybe half the cost it would cost elsewhere buying it publicly. So there's a lot of that partnership and a lot of that openness in saying, hey, again, we know we need this stuff. we're very open. If you have a solution, come to us. We're happy to test it out. We're happy to give you access to our data, to our people, whatever it may be, to be able to hopefully build fantastic products and innovations that are going to help us one day as well. So that's definitely one of the great things that's here in Israel, that the openness to that startup community for innovation, being open to the building those relationships and getting that technology into companies that normally would take probably decades to build it themselves.
Yeah, and we got to understand that in Israel, it's really very open because usually this funding opportunity is given through venture capitalists or angel investors only. But when
Yep,
the community as a whole participate in this innovation, it gets a lot of boost, and that's
sure.
certainly something which we can learn from Israel as well.
Yep,
So that was really very insightful, Scott. I got to understand a lot of things from our short meeting, and
sure.
anything else, probably if you would like to add it from your end, anything.
I, I think I mean the last thing is, I personally give a lot of kudos to the prime minister and to the government for the work that they did here. Um, the fact that they made so much effort. I know there's lots of political things. There's been, I think, 4 elections. There's probably a fifth one or a sixth one coming along. Any time now. So there's lots of friction here. But for me, what the government did to be able to get the vaccines ahead of everybody else, there was a lot of articles that said that Prime Minister Netanyahu had called the CEO of Pfizer 30 times and kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I had read an article maybe about 2 weeks ago saying, I think, that it was down to Israel and Estonia, who's going to be the kind of pilot the country to get the vaccinations. And they both had similar systems of having health data going back 30 plus years, a centralized source of data. Here in Israel, everything is in kind of one data warehouse. So if you move from one HMO to the other, the data is already there. If you go to a hospital, heaven forbid, the data is already there. Um, it was very much kind of in line between us and Estonia, how the systems were set up. But he said that the real difference maker was Prime Minister Netanyahu calling all the time, saying, "We have to have these. We got to get them. Like, give us the donation, give us the vaccinations." So I give a lot of credit to, certainly to him and the rest of the government for making such an effort to get the country vaccinated, um, and getting us towards the end of this. It's just that passion again. That certainly that one of the Jewish principles is the pricelessness of every life, and having such a kind of the deep rooted spiritual sense of every life is important and we care about every single person, and we need to do whatever we need to do and go to endless ends of the earth to be able to get this finished and get the vaccinations and get people healthy. I give him kudos to that. I think by far he should get the Nobel Prize. He probably should get one for also the Abraham Accords from last year, but the efforts that he made for getting the vaccinations here. And I heard that I think we have now getting 6 million for next year. Hopefully we don't need them; they all go to waste, and nobody else in the world needs them. But it seemed like the effort is saying, okay, we need to have these on hand just in case. Let's get the country vaccinated. I give a lot of credit to the prime minister and the government for making all that effort to making sure that, I guess, we could cross the finish line first.
Sure. Yeah, certainly a great willpower and political will has been demonstrated by the government over there. And I
Yeah,
hope, really hope, we and the whole world would be able to cope up with this situation. And next time when we get to talk, we won't be talking like this. We would
for
probably,
sure.
be there in your country and traveling freely. So with
Yep,
that, is really thanks for your time. I
my
really got
pleasure.
a lot of things, and I'm sure whoever would be referring this video, they will also get to learn a lot about Israel, how
Yep,
they cope up with the situation, and there are really a lot of things which can be understood from this talk. So really, thanks for that. Really insightful.
perfect. It's my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to speak and share the experience of what's going on here in Israel. And again, wishing a quick and speedy end to the situation over there in India, and hopefully we can get everybody there vaccinated quickly as well. And yeah, hopefully next time we have this conversation, we'll be able to do it together.
While eating tacos, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe if you're coming to Israel, we'll do something like hummus or some Israeli food that you get the real experience.
Sure, Scott. I'm looking forward to that. Thank
Excellent,
you, Scott, for
excellent.
your time, then.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of the day. All the best.
Have a great day. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.